he's in this leftist thought bubble. He is in the most leftist thought bubble available, which is Hollywood. Famously, there's some videos of him in blackface, and those came out, and he had to apologize for them. And I think he took that hit and like really doubled down the other direction.
Joe Rogan has never been one to hold back, and this time his sights were firmly locked on Jimmy Kimmel. When Rogan decides to roast someone, it isn't with scripted one-liners or pre-approved punchlines. It's raw, off the cuff, and completely unfiltered. That's exactly why people tune in. They want to hear someone say the things no one else dares to say, especially when it comes to figures like Kimmel, who've built their careers on being polished, politically correct, and safe. But safe doesn't fly with Rogan. So when the subject of late night comedy came up, Rogan didn't hesitate to call out Kimmel for what he sees as hypocrisy, pandering, and the ultimate downfall of modern television comedy. On his podcast, Rogan started laughing at the idea that Jimmy Kimmel is still considered a comedian. He compared the late night host's delivery to a school teacher reading out announcements over a PA system, completely predictable, tightly scripted, and lacking the slightest hint of genuine spontaneity. Rogan went on to joke that Kimmel's show has turned into more of a political press release than an actual comedy platform, saying it feels like watching someone try to sneak jokes into a lecture. And he didn't stop there. He reminded his audience that Kimmel has a history of putting himself at the center of cultural debates, using late night television as a soapbox to preach rather than entertain. The audience ate it up. Rogan's mocking tone resonated because so many people feel the same way. Kimmel represents the corporate, carefully packaged face of Hollywood humor, and it's a far cry from what comedy used to be. Rogan cracked jokes about how Kimmel's writers probably spend more time worrying about which sponsors might get offended than actually writing punchlines that land. He painted an image of a boardroom full of executives debating whether a joke might upset the wrong demographic, reducing late-night comedy to a safe, sterile product designed to appease advertisers rather than audiences. To Rogan, that's not comedy. That's just propaganda with a laugh track.
Apparently, they forgot about this clip that has just resurfaced of their free speech martyr himself, Jimmy Kimmel. I wonder if they're gonna be watching his show after they see this.
I have no idea what he's doing behind me.
He's perfectly still.
I'm like trying to be very, very
You don't play up the glitter on your legs.
Oh, you don't.
Andy, don't please. Don't touch Ivanka.
Oh, wait, did I say I was single and then I had a boyfriend?
Andy, please don't. Donald Trump will kill both of us.
Actually, prior to my coming on the show, I think my father made you promise to defend my honor. And this is before he knew Andy would be on it with me.
He never would have allowed you to come here if he'd known Andy was here. Andy, you promised you would behave yourself.
Oh my God, you're crazy. You're crazy for supporting this. Because this will be used on you. You don't think that the fucking globalist lizard people who run the world are sitting here going, great, what do we got, 3 years? We'll wait this out.
When he really got rolling, Rogan turned Kimmel's past controversies into ammunition. He brought up the infamous blackface skits that Kimmel once did and how quickly Kimmel pivoted into the most outspoken, politically correct voice in Hollywood after those clips resurfaced. Rogan called it the ultimate overcorrection, joking that Kimmel must have a buzzer in his ear that goes off whenever he forgets to push a certain narrative. The humor wasn't just in the jokes, it was in Rogan's delivery, his timing, and his obvious delight at poking holes in the carefully constructed image that Kimmel tries to project. Rogan mocked the way Kimmel cries on camera, calling it performance tears and suggesting that Kimmel treats his show like an audition for sainthood rather than a comedy program. The roast didn't just stop at personal jabs. Rogan widened the lens, using Kimmel as a symbol of the decline of late-night television in general. He pointed out how late-night hosts once thrived by being edgy, rebellious, and unpredictable, but now they've been reduced to mouthpieces for political talking points. He contrasted Kimmel's staged monologues with his own podcast where conversations go on for hours and nothing is off limits. Rogan joked that his guests have more genuine, unscripted moments in a 5-minute tangent than Kimmel delivers in an entire season of rehearsed monologues. And the punchline was clear. Audiences are smart enough to tell the difference, which is why more people are tuning in to podcasts and walking away from mainstream shows like Kimmel's. Rogan's criticism of Kimmel's pandering didn't fall on deaf ears. Clips of the roast went viral, and viewers were quick to pile on with their own takes. Fans of Rogan pointed out how late-night ratings have been sinking for years, while podcasting has exploded. They echoed Rogan's point that Kimmel isn't funny anymore because his humor is shackled by corporate interests and political agendas. Rogan made fun of Kimmel's reliance on cue cards and teleprompters, joking that the guy wouldn't know what to say if you turn the screen off. He even compared Kimmel's monologues to a karaoke performance where the singer doesn't actually know the words. They're just reading along and hoping nobody notices. It was brutal, and it was hilarious. The most devastating part of Rogan's roast came when he questioned Kimmel's authenticity. He said Kimmel doesn't really believe half the things he says on air, but delivers them because he knows they'll please the Hollywood crowd and keep his seat at the table secure. Rogan compared it to an actor reciting lines in a play, except the play never ends and the script is written by network executives. He laughed about how Kimmel spends his nights making fun of politicians, but spends his days rubbing elbows with those same politicians at Hollywood events. To Rogan, the whole thing screams of fakery, and audiences are beginning to wake up to it. As the roast continued, Rogan highlighted the stark difference between their audiences. He said people who watch his show want unfiltered truth, raw opinions, and the kind of humor that pushes boundaries. People who watch Kimmel, on the other hand, want safe, sanitized jokes that never stray too far from the approved narrative. Rogan mocked the idea of someone tuning into Kimmel every night just to be reminded of the same political talking points they've already seen on Twitter. He joked that watching Kimmel is like reheating leftovers. You already know what's coming and it doesn't taste any better the second time around. That comparison stuck because it perfectly captured the predictability that has come to define Kimmel's brand of comedy. The roast also tapped into the bigger cultural shift happening in entertainment. Rogan pointed out how the internet has leveled the playing field, giving independent voices a platform that rivals mainstream media. He laughed at the fact that a single episode of his podcast often reaches more people than Kimmel's late night show does, despite all the corporate backing and primetime placement. Rogan joked that it must drive Kimmel crazy, knowing that a 3-hour conversation with a random guest can get more attention than months of carefully curated television content. And it wasn't just a flex. It was a sign of how audiences are moving away from the old structures of entertainment and towards something more real. When Rogan's fans reacted online, they echoed his sentiment that Kimmel has become less of a comedian and more of a political commentator dressed up in late-night packaging. They pointed out that Kimmel's comedy hasn't evolved. It's devolved into predictable one-liners designed to generate applause rather than laughter. Meanwhile, Rogan has built a reputation for giving people what they can't get anywhere else: real conversations, controversial opinions, and jokes that don't feel manufactured. The contrast couldn't be more obvious, and Rogan drove the point home with humor that cut deep. As the feud grew legs in the media, it became about more than just Rogan and Kimmel. Commentators began framing it as a clash between new media and old media, authenticity and artifice, free speech and controlled speech. Rogan leaned into that framing, making fun of how Kimmel is stuck in a format that hasn't changed in decades. He mocked the idea of a host walking out, delivering a monologue, interviewing a celebrity, and ending with a band performance like it's still the 1980s. Rogan laughed about how audiences today crave realness, not canned laughter and predictable setups. He said Kimmel represents the last gasp of a dying industry, clinging to relevance while the world moves on. Even Kimmel's supporters had to admit that Rogan's points stung because there was truth to them. Ratings don't lie, and late-night shows across the board have seen a sharp decline. Rogan took that fact and twisted the knife, mocking the idea that Kimmel could still claim cultural influence when his viewership numbers are dwarfed by independent creators on platforms like YouTube and Spotify. He joked that more people probably watch a random cat video than tune in to Kimmel's show on a given night. And when Rogan made that comparison, it went viral on social media, with fans repeating the line as a running gag at Kimmel's expense. The beauty of Rogan's roast was that it wasn't mean-spirited for the sake of being cruel. It was funny because it highlighted the absurdity of Kimmel's situation. A man who once thrived on irreverence and unpredictability has turned into a safe, predictable late-night host whose best days are behind him. Rogan held up that mirror, and audiences couldn't stop laughing at the reflection. It was comedy doing what comedy does best, exposing truth through humor, even if the truth stings. And in this case, the truth was clear. Jimmy Kimmel has lost the edge that once made him relevant, and Joe Rogan was more than happy to point it out. As the conversation around the roast continued to unfold, it became clear that Rogan had touched a nerve. Kimmel's fans tried to push back, insisting that late-night comedy has always been political, and that Kimmel is simply continuing a tradition of speaking truth to power. But Rogan's counterargument was devastating in its simplicity. Kimmel isn't speaking truth to power, he's speaking for power. His jokes don't punch up, they punch exactly where the Hollywood establishment tells him to. And that's why so many people no longer find it funny. Comedy is supposed to challenge, not conform. It's supposed to break boundaries, not reinforce them. Rogan's roast cut to the heart of that distinction. By the time Rogan wrapped up, there was no mistaking who had won this battle of words. Kimmel may have a network, a studio, and a team of writers behind him, but Rogan has something far more powerful: authenticity. And authenticity is what people crave in today's world of polished lies and manufactured narratives. Rogan's humor might be rough around the edges, but that's exactly why it works. It feels real because it is real. Kimmel's comedy, by contrast, feels like reheated leftovers, stale, predictable, and lacking flavor. And when Rogan made that comparison, it became the defining line of the roast. The feud between Rogan and Kimmel will no doubt flare up again, because two personalities this different are bound to clash. But the truth is, Rogan doesn't even need to keep going after Kimmel. The numbers, the culture, and the audiences already tell the story. Late night television is fading, while podcasts and independent voices are rising. Rogan simply put into words what millions of viewers already feel. And by making fun of Kimmel in the way only Rogan can, he turned a cultural divide into a comedy routine that audiences will remember long after Kimmel's monologues are forgotten. As the story developed further, Rogan's critique began spilling into conversations about where comedy is heading in the next decade. He noted that young audiences aren't gravitating toward late night anymore. They're on podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, and other platforms where the energy feels raw and immediate. He laughed about how Kimmel's format feels like it belongs to a generation that still flips channels with a remote, while today's viewers swipe through clips on their phones. Rogan mocked the idea that anyone under 30 is setting a DVR for Jimmy Kimmel Live, pointing out that most wouldn't even know what channel it's on. The jab wasn't just funny, it was piercing, because it revealed the disconnect between Kimmel's old guard style and the new world of digital media. Rogan drove home that comedy is thriving outside the system Kimmel depends on, and that the longer Kimmel clings to that system, the more irrelevant he'll look. Rogan also used the moment to highlight how audiences are no longer willing to blindly trust media gatekeepers. He pointed out that people tune into podcasts because they want to hear the full conversation, not just the carefully clipped version. He joked that Kimmel's show is like watching a highlight reel where someone else already decided what you're allowed to see, while his podcast feels like sitting at the table with real people hashing things out. That distinction, Rogan argued, is why Kimmel's model is losing steam. Even celebrities themselves are opting for long-form podcasts to share their stories because they know late night only gives them 5 minutes of pre-approved banter. Rogan laughed at how strange it is that Hollywood keeps clinging to old systems when everyone can see the future moving in a different direction. For him, Kimmel isn't just a rival to poke fun at. He's proof of how out of touch the old media world has become.